Okay, shalom to everyone. Or as they say in Texas, shalom y'all. And great to be here. And I've been in and out of Texas for the last 6 weeks with little jaunts to Louisiana and Oklahoma and Missouri. But it seems like getting back to New York where my van is mission impossible. So I'm kind of like doing pretty well, actually. Praise God for Texas. And we're going to talk the next about 3 hours on different aspects of what is going on right now here in the United States and Israel and the Middle East. And I'm going to try to cover many, many different subjects, and then I tie them all together, or as Americans would say, I connect the dots. Now, the first thing I want to say is, having been born in the United States, I think that the United States, with all due respect to China and Russia, is the greatest country on earth, and there is no other country in the world that could replace the United States as world power number one. And I also want to say at the very outset that we all need to pray for President Trump for his good health, his long life, and his re-election on November 3rd. And it'll sound kind of strange that Avi Lipkin is preaching Christian revival, but as an Israeli and as a Jew, we need a Christian America. We need a strong Judeo-Christian Western civilization and democracy in the US, in Canada, in Latin America, in Europe, as a bulwark to protect Israel from those enemies who would like to destroy Israel also. And I've spoken here many times before, but it has to be understood that America, until now, for the last 400 years, has been called the great Christian Satan by Islam. And Israel is the little Satan, the little Jewish Satan. And the way to destroy the little Jewish Satan is to destroy the big Satan first, which is America. One of the things I wanted to share is that there are two ways to destroy America. One is militarily, like through 9/11. But as you all know, that does not work because the American military knows what to do. The second way is much more insidious and much more evolutionary as compared to revolutionary. And what we see happening is, on two major fronts, the disintegration of the United States through Marxism, socialism, and communism, and on the other hand, the immigration to Israel of 30 million Muslims. And I know many of you will be shocked when I say 30 million in America today, but I will talk about that as we go along. Now, of course, Muslims are fantastic people. Muslims are like any other people, but the agenda of Islam is very, very nefarious. Because it does say in the Hadith, kill the Jew on Saturday, kill the Christian on Sunday. So we will talk about Islam a little more into the message, but what I want to do first is I want to share about the greatness of America. How did America get to be great? What is the process of making America a great nation? What is the process that has been bringing America down in the last few decades? How do we stop that, and how do we restore America on the path to greatness? Now, there was a German philosopher 200 years ago. His name was Heinrich Heine. Heinrich Heine, who actually was a Jew who converted to Christianity in order to get a job, because that's the way it was in Germany 200 years ago. If you were German and you wanted a job, you could not be a Jew. You had to convert. So many Jews converted. Even the Prime Minister of England, Benjamin Disraeli, converted to Anglicanism to become the Prime Minister of Queen Victoria in 1840. It was also Benjamin Disraeli who said that, how do we know that God exists? And the answer is, because the Jews have existed for 4,000 years. This is proof of the living God. So Heinrich Heine, the German philosopher, said 200 years ago that the world is going to have to choose between the despotism and tyranny of the Russians. Now, this is before communism. This is during the czars of Russia. The despotism and tyranny of Russia and the foolishness of the Americans. Okay, so remember foolishness. America is a foolish nation. I'm going to qualify that now. There was a Frenchman 200 years ago who came to America in the early days of the United States, 1820s, 30s, and 40s. His name was Alexis de Tocqueville. How many people heard of Alexis de Tocqueville? So I see a few hands. That means this is a high-level group, because after 1966, this was taken out of the curriculum in American schools. And he wrote a book called Democracy in America. And he said that America, this is 200 years ago, America will be the greatest country on earth because the American people are good people and their pulpits are on fire for the Lord. Meaning, America is a Christian country. Conversely, America would fall from power when pulpits were not on fire for the Lord. Meaning, when Christianity was removed, like In God We Trust, or One Nation Under God, and you know that the Democratic Party is trying to do that, remove God from the equation. So what happens is, when you remove God, you're no longer foolish in the Lord. You are merely foolish. And America loses its preeminence. Now, I learned the Old Testament thanks to the New Testament. And there's a teaching in both the Proverbs, in the Old Testament, and in the New Testament, I don't remember the exact quote, that the foolishness of the Lord is greater than the wisdom of man. How many people have heard that? That's one of the most popular subjects in churches. The foolishness of the Lord is greater than the wisdom of man. And you know, I have to tell you, I'm a Jew. And for us Jewish people, wisdom is everything. How can it be that any kind of foolishness could be greater than any kind of wisdom? Because we're wise people. You know what they say about the Jewish people? Individually, we are all geniuses. But as a collective, we're very stupid. That will be funnier as we go through the message. And after a while, being very active in Israeli politics and having grown up in America until age 19, I kind of understood that God has his hand on America and God has his hand on Israel, and no matter how many stupid mistakes we make, we always come out on top. And the answer is, America is foolish, but it is foolish in the Lord. No matter how many mistakes you make, you will always come out on top. America. But if you remove the Lord from the equation, then you're merely foolish. And then the country gets flushed down the tubes. Any country which is supposedly Christian, but then abandons God, gets flushed down the tubes. And I want you to know, I studied Sovietology for 5 years in college, and the Russians are a very good people. They're very wise people. But their system never developed like the American and the British systems. I don't want to go too much into my family history, but my great whoever was brought over to Poland by the King of Poland in 1600, and my family built the walls of Warsaw. And this is during the Turkish invasions. Remember, the Turks were raiding Moscow, the Turks were raiding Warsaw, the Turks were at the gates of Vienna. You heard of the Black Sea? That was a Turkish lake. And at that time, actually, the Jews were very well-to-do in Poland because we were the right-hand people of the King of Poland. We were the tax collectors. We were the financiers. We knew how to read and write, which many people didn't in those days. And so we helped to build Christian Poland as Jewish guests who later stayed in Poland. Later, Poland was actually conquered by the Russians. And so, you know, the Jews were punished by the Russians for being allies of the King of Poland. And then eventually the Catholic Church in Poland turned against the Jews as well. So we're going to talk about that too. But what I'm trying to emphasize here is that there is something known as Western civilization and democracy. And I want to talk a little bit about that. You see, our civilization today, I'm giving you a 3-year or 4-year BA course now on Western civilization in about 5 minutes. Our civilization today as we know it, those of us sitting here tonight and many of those who are watching, starts with Mount Sinai. Starts with the 10 Commandments, the giving of the Torah, eventually the 12 tribes invading the land of Israel. We have our Solomon's temple from 100 BC. Then we have Herod's temple. And some very interesting things happen. The Greeks come in. Alexander the Great. And that was in the 4th century BC. And we Jews actually received Alexander the Great as a liberator, as a hero. And of course, in 165 BC, we had the War of the Maccabees against the Seleucid Greeks, as the Syrians. But actually, Greek culture became the norm among the Jews in Israel at that time. Just as today, American culture has been adopted virtually by the whole world. Then came the Romans. And we had some very disastrous wars with the Romans. And we were scattered all over Europe. That's how my family got to Poland, via Germany, via Switzerland, via the Alps, and via the expulsion from Israel, either in 70 AD or 135 AD. But to put it simply, the greatness of our civilization starts with Judaism, followed by Greek philosophy, 3rd century, 4th century BC, followed by the Romans, followed by Christianity, which, I don't know if you know this or not, but Christianity is a form of Judaism. You all know that. And so here you see different factors all coming together to develop this new culture known as Judeo-Christian Western civilization and democracy. And of course, in 1053, there was a split between the Catholic Church and the Russian Greek Orthodox Byzantine Church. Then you had the Crusades. And of course, the Crusades were a response to the Muslim invasions of Europe 1,000 years ago. Actually, 1,400 years ago. And then we had the Renaissance. You all heard of the Renaissance. Then you all heard of Christopher Columbus, the statue of whom they're tearing down now. Marco Polo, going to China. And the world is beginning to open up. People are getting to know many cultures. And what our Western civilization was good at was taking whatever was good for the common good from all these different cultures. And then something very interesting happens. In 1215, Prince John, who was really a bad guy, and he relied on the Jews for financing. I mean, the Jews would only be tolerated in England if they helped the king to finance him, because the kings were always at wars and they needed financing. And the aristocrats of England at that time came out with the very famous Magna Carta. And I'll tell you something, by the way, the Magna Carta was a very anti-Semitic document because it called on the expulsion of the Jews. Because the Jews were the allies of this evil Prince John. So in history, many times you are judged by not who you are, but with whom do you stand. And this has been one of the big problems for the Jewish people throughout history. But the positive aspect of the Magna Carta was that Prince John was not allowed anymore to rule as a tyrant. When he wanted something, it had to be approved by the noblemen. Now, that's not democracy yet, but it's the beginning of the breaking down of the totalitarianism of the leader of that time. Then, right after the Crusades, you have the Renaissance. and you see the world developing in a whole new direction. And then Christopher Columbus discovers the Americas. All of a sudden, Spain and Portugal rise to eminence. They have their Inquisition, and they're killing not only Jews, but when the Protestant Reformation breaks out in Northern Europe, they're killing Protestants. Protestants were burned at the stake together with the Jews. You know, I want to tell you something. In the Talmud, it says that Jews are not allowed to go into houses of pagan worship. And the rabbis have interpreted that to mean Christian churches. Because in the 5th century AD, when the Talmud was written, all of these churches were Catholic or Greek. And they had statues, and they had icons. And so indeed, if you went into a Catholic church or a Greek church in the 5th century, you were going against the Talmud. But what happened with the Protestant Reformation? What did the Protestants do? They removed the statues. They removed the icons. And so when I meet up with rabbis in Israel, or even here in America, they're very shocked when I say, well, you know what, the Protestants are not pagans. The Protestant churches are not pagan houses of worship. The Catholics still have statues. By the way, you know, Black Lives Matter and Antifa, they want to destroy the statues in the Catholic churches of Jesus. Why are they tearing down all of these statues and monuments here in America? Because the Hamas is telling Black Lives Matter to tear them all down, because in Islam there may be no graven images. And people don't understand that there's a very strong connection between Hamas, the Islamic terrorist organization, and Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is kind of like seen as useful idiots of Hamas, because Hamas has a plan for America, which is to Islamicize America, and in that case you have to remove the statues. So the Protestant Reformation, which in certain aspects, you know, you had Martin Luther, he was an anti-Semite. At first he was okay with the Jews as long as the Jews would convert to Lutheranism. Then he became virulently anti-Semitic, and Hitler used the Lutheran anti-Semitic teachings to destroy the Jews. And then what happened was many Jews fled from the Catholic countries to places like England and Holland and other countries in Europe. Then they came to America. And the Protestants who now were reading the Bible in all their different languages, because of the Gutenberg press, all of a sudden you had the Bible readily available to everyone. And then you had a period called the Enlightenment. And there's a very famous philosopher by the name of Voltaire. Now, Voltaire was an anti-Semite. Voltaire was excommunicated by the Catholic Church. But Voltaire is my role model. Because Voltaire said, I might not agree with what you have to say, but I will defend with my life your right to say it. Now, isn't that what America's all about? I might not agree with what you have to say, but I'll defend with my life your right to say it. But what's happening in America today? People who are not socialists, Marxists, and leftists get shouted down by the socialists, Marxists, and leftists. And so people who have maybe a slightly different viewpoint, right-wing or patriotic, get shouted down by the socialists. So that goes against Voltaire. Because Voltaire said, I will defend with my life your right to have another opinion. But this idea was adopted by the American revolutionaries. And until maybe a few decades ago, you didn't have to be ashamed to come out with a patriotic remark. God save America. Now, I'm 71 and a half, almost 72. And I have seen what has been going on in America for the last, since I was a young boy. I was born in 49. In the 1950s, I went to elementary school, 60s, junior and senior high, college. And as far as I knew, this was a Christian country. I actually moved to Israel because I thought, well, you know what? It's a Christian country. I'm a Jew. I'm going to Israel. Because I was taught in Hebrew school that all Christians were bad. I was taught in Hebrew school that America's Christians were going to eventually kill us because in every country where the Jews live, they get killed eventually. And I wrote to David Ben-Gurion, our first prime minister in Israel. He wrote me back, and I decided at 15 I'm moving to Israel. And I moved. I left my mom and dad here, my sister and brother. There was a lot of anger against me till their deaths. Then I met my wife, Rachel. And the first thing she says to me, why did you leave America? And I said to her, because the Gentiles, or in Hebrew, the Goyim, hate us. How many people know the word Goyim? Goyim is a pejorative term for Christians in America. Either you're a Jew or you're a Goy. Either you're a Jew or you are a Gentile. And my wife said to me, are you saying that the Christians are Gentiles? I said, yes, you're a Jew or you're a Gentile. And my wife said to me, not only are you crazy for leaving America, but you also don't know anything. Because Christians are not Gentiles. Christians are not pagans. Christians believe in the same God as Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We have the same Old Testament. And the Messiah, we all agree, is a Jew from Israel who speaks Hebrew. So how can they be pagans? The Gentiles or pagans are not the Christians. The Gentiles or pagans are the Muslims. And my wife said to me, and I agree with that, Muslims are fantastic people. I love Muslims. You know why they're fantastic people? Because they're people. People are created in the image of whom? Of God. Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, Christians, Jews, we are all in the image of God. Does God hate any of us? God doesn't hate any of us because we're all children of God, created in His image. The Muslims have another God called Allah al-Ilahi, which means Allah, the moon God. You see the moon crescent on the mosques? Their God is the moon. Allah in Arabic is Allah al-Ilahi, Allah, the moon crescent God. The sword God and the war God. That is not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, of the Jews and the Christians. By the way, 70% of the Muslims are illiterate, so they don't even know what their own ideology is telling them, but they do what they're told, or otherwise they will be killed. They have another book called the Quran, and the Quran was written by a rabbi and a priest who were kidnapped by these desert nomads who were illiterate, put in a pit and said, you write the holy book for us, greater than the New Testament and Old Testament, or we will kill you. But if you write the book, we'll let you go. But they were double-crossers, and they killed him anyway when the book was finished. But the Quran has many, many inconsistencies that were planted specifically by the rabbi and the priest to self-destruct the Quran. I cover this in my black book, Islam Prophesied in Genesis. And then finally, the Mahdi, the Messiah in Islam, is coming back again to kill the Jews on Saturday and the Christians on Sunday, because I don't know if you know this or not, but the Jews and the Christians are one people. In Arabic, we are called Ahl al-Kitab, which means the people of the book. And the only difference between Jews and Christians is that Jews and Christians observe Sabbath on different days. Jews on Saturday, Christians on Sunday. Therefore, they say, kill the Jew on Saturday and kill the Christian on Sunday. Okay. So, getting back to America, America is a Protestant country. Different Protestant groups that had to flee Europe for different reasons. Even though the King of England was now Anglican Protestant, but the Puritans, the Pilgrims, the Huguenots, the Amish, all these different groups had to flee Europe, and they came to America for religious freedom. And you know who came also? The Jews. And these Protestants who are now reading the Bible in English, they love the Jews. Because it says in the translation into the English, the Jews are the chosen people. And the way that the American Protestants who founded this country related to the Jews was we were Hebrews, we were Israelites, we were, the chosen nation. And from the 1600s, from the very beginning, you find Jewish colonies in New York, then it was New Amsterdam, Dutch colony, Providence, Rhode Island, Charleston, South Carolina, and Savannah, Georgia. So there were Jews here in the 1640s. In the American Revolutionary War, 500 Jewish revolutionary soldiers stood bivouac in Valley Forge on Christmas when the Christians were praying the Christmas services. So the Jews were guarding the Christians. How many people heard that before? So the American Revolution was bankrupt in the summer of 1777, and General George Washington came to the Jews and said, guess what? The British are coming, and they're going to hang all of us, including you Jews, unless you Jews go home and bring your gold. And the Jews came back on Yom Kippur, the holiest day, with gold, and the Jews saved the American Revolution. So the Jews were there from day one. In the American Civil War, I know the Black Lives Matter would be very angry about this, but there were so many Jewish soldiers in the Confederate Army that when they came to Jefferson Davis and said, we want to go home for our Jewish high holidays, and Jefferson Davis said, God forbid, if you Jews go home, the Confederate military collapses. That's how many Jewish officers there were in the Confederate Army. And Judah Benjamin was actually the vice president and treasurer of the Confederacy, Jewish guy. I know a descendant of his who lives in Dallas. You've got Jews who've been here 11 generations, 20 generations, going all the way back. And of course, President Lincoln saw that the Jews were in such high esteem in the South, and he established the Jewish chaplaincy for the Union Army in the Civil War at the same time. There were many Jews in the Northern Army also. And so Jews have been here from day one. Do you know where those Jews are today? They're sitting here in this church. All of you have Jewish blood, whether you know it or not, because somewhere in the last hundreds of years, there has been intermarriage with the Jews. And of course, there are the anusim, or the forced conversions, conversos, to Christianity in Spain, who also came here, maybe through Mexico or Brazil or other countries, who always maintained their separate, distinct Judaic identity, even though they were forced to believe in Christ. But the point is, America was so great because of its Judeo-Christian character that the Jews were respected. Now, it's true in World War II that many Jews were killed because they could not get out of Europe because President Roosevelt would not give them visas, and the Canadians wouldn't give them visas, and the British wouldn't give them visas, and so Hitler felt he had no choice but to kill all the Jews, which is a horrible thing. I think it was General Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, who coined the term in 1952, Judeo-Christian Western civilization and democracy. But the point is, until General Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, America was just a Christian country. And America was kind of a crazy country. It was very isolationist. It didn't want to get involved in World War I, and it got sucked into World War I. It didn't want to get into World War II, got sucked into World War II 3 years after the German attack on England and on Europe. Americans say, we just want to live free. We have a great country from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Canada is perhaps the greatest neighbor in the world that any country could ever want. Mexico to the south, maybe there's some problems, but they're Christians. Mexicans are Christians. So America was very comfortable being isolationist. But God had a plan for America. And America was the only country that had an ideology that could embrace everyone. And when I go to Europe, I say to the European Christians, you guys don't realize how lucky the Americans are. Because we have our Mexicans, we have our Latinos, who are coming into America, and they're Christian. You Europeans don't have Mexicans to your south or Latinos to the south. So you bring in Muslims and you bring in others who are not of the same faith. Or maybe you bring in people who want to destroy your country and bring in another system. And that's what we see happening today in Europe. I want to get back to Russia for a moment. I'm a Sovietologist. So the Russians had the czars until 1917, Russian Orthodox. Russian Orthodox are kind of like the Catholics in the sense that they're totalitarian. There was never a Magna Carta. There was never an Enlightenment. There was never a movement for democracy in Russia. And the Tsar, who was a totalitarian, was eventually overthrown by the Bolshevik communist totalitarian revolution. And so Russia does not have at all a democratic background, a democratic history from 1215, like the Americans and the Brits and the Canadians and the other Anglo countries. I will say also another thing interesting. My family left Europe, my grandparents left Europe, Russia, Poland, Ukraine, and they went to Argentina. And Argentina and Latin America, believe it or not, they've become democratic. You have had countries that were communist at a time, and the communist governments were kind of overthrown. You have countries that go towards socialism in different ways. But you take Brazil, for example, that had socialist governments for decades, and all of a sudden today you have Bolsonaro, who's a born-again Christian. When you're a born-again Christian, you're going to be a democratic person. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion. It was also Alexis de Tocqueville who said that the European Christianity, Catholicism, smothered democracy, blocked democracy, but the American Christianity is at the heart of the Western democracy. And so it's Protestant. So again, as I said before, I was born in 1949. America, I was taught, did not want to get into World War I. And America had to finish the World War I and bring order back to the world. Then America didn't want to get into World War II, again, another German war. And America didn't want to get into World War II, and America had to get into World War II, and America saved the world in World War II. America saved the world in the Communist Cold War. You had the Korean War. If it hadn't been for America, it was also a UN war against North Korea and Russia, China. And then something began to go wrong. This is what I want to talk about. Where are we today? What began to go wrong? It was something called the Vietnam War. I studied at New York University in 1966 to 1968. And there was a generation of potheads, people who were all smoking pot, taking drugs, demonstrating violently against the United States in what seemed to me a horrible war. Vietnam was a horrible war. It might not have been a just war in certain senses, but it was part of the war between the evil empire of communism and the free world of the United States and its allies. And I was out there, Zionist, 66, 67, Six-Day War. And I was saying to my fellow Jews, come and demonstrate outside the UN to help save Israel from destruction, because we thought Israel was going to be destroyed in 1967. And they said, no, we're Americans, we're only interested in Vietnam War. And we're going to protest against the American involvement in Vietnam. You know, there's a joke that maybe you guys don't understand because you're too young maybe, but what is the difference between Bill Clinton and Jane Fonda? Jane Fonda did go to Vietnam. Anyway, young people don't understand that. Bill Clinton dodged the draft and Jane Fonda went over to the enemy. And people would say to me at New York University, "Oh, you don't smoke pot? You're a fascist." I said, "Wow, am I proud to be a fascist, that I don't smoke pot." But one of the reasons I moved to Israel was because I said, this country is sinking like the Titanic. This was 1967, 1968. I was saying, if America is so sick and so anti-patriotic, I'm going to get out of here. And I went to Israel. And I'm going to come back to that in a moment, but I want to say something today. One of the most damning things I'm going to say tonight, that since the Vietnam War, 60 years have gone by. That's 3 generations of young people who were poisoned in the American universities and colleges by professors and deans who were the potheads in the Vietnam War. And the history has been rewritten to vilify America, to make America look terrible. And so today, young people in America either know nothing about the history of America, or what they know is totally falsified by the potheads of the anti-war movement in the 1960s, the Marxists and the Socialists. Do you remember Nikita Khrushchev of Russia? He came to the US in 1960, banged his shoe on the table, and he said, "We're going to make your country communist, and you won't even know it, because we're going to use socialism, and we're going to use a dropper. And every day and every week and every month and every year and every decade, we're going to make your people more and more stupefied. And eventually you will fall, America will fall like ripe fruit in the hands of the Marxists and Socialists." And I'm going to say something very painful for me. Who's to blame? The American churches. Because the American churches have not been teaching the American history, what is right and what is wrong, and what made America great. And so I go around the United States and I ask young people, who's George Washington? They don't even know. Who's Jefferson? Who's Hamilton? Who's Jackson? They don't know. Who's Lincoln? They don't know. And the little they know is all wrong. Because things have been so changed and so tilted against the greatness of America. By whom? A socialist. And so I beseech the American churches to do their job and not continue with this political correctness. I've heard so many pastors saying, "Oh, we don't get involved in politics." Oh, yeah? When there are bad people in politics and you don't get involved in politics, you're only adding to the evil being done by the bad people. So today, we are in a horrible situation in the United States. And I would add Canada, US. I haven't been in Latin America recently, but socialism is very strong, what they call liberation theology. It's very strong in the Catholic Church in Latin America. Europe has become very socialist. I'm going to say something about Europe now. They're going to say something about the Jews, and they all come together. You know, I'm a stamp collector, and born in '49, and among many of my first stamps were stamps from something called the Common Market. Does anyone remember the Common Market? See, you wouldn't because you're too young. Oh, you're my age, so it's okay. The Common Market started out as Benelux. I have stamps that say Benelux. Benelux is Belgium, Holland, and Luxembourg. These are the first 3 countries of the European Union. They were little countries, and every time you wanted to cross the border, you had to change currencies and go with your passport, and it was very, very cumbersome. And they said, you know what, cancel all that. Let's make it a political and economic unit. Then it expanded from Belgium, Holland, and Luxembourg to the 10 common market countries. And now it's the European Union of 26 nations. And, I don't know about you guys, but I grew up in the 60s with the music of Richard Rodgers, Victory at Sea, and World War II. And I'm a history freak. I love history. I don't judge the Arabs, and I don't judge the Israelis, and I don't judge the Nazis and the Russians and the Americans and the French and the British. Every country is right according to their own way of understanding things. But I love history. I study the battles, I study the generals. By the way, the American Civil War was a horrible war. I think 600,000 people died. And the South is being completely vilified. But let me tell you, those people who fought in the Southern armies fought ideologically for what they believed in, which was part of the American culture at that time. Today we all know slavery is a horrible thing, but in those days it was kind of accepted, it was wrong. Anti-Semitism has always been a horrible thing. But the world was anti-Semitic for so many years. It still is. Do you see Jews blowing up Lufthansa aircraft? Do you see Jews blowing up German interests or German businesses because of what they did to us? Did they kill 6 million of us? So I say to the Black Lives Matter, calm down. But the problem is Black Lives Matter is Hamas. Hamas and Black Lives Matter, they're together. They work together to destroy Christian America. We have to remember that the ultimate goal is the destruction of Judeo-Christian Western civilization and democracy. The Marxists agree with that, and the Muslims agree with that, and they work together. So getting back to the Europeans, the purpose of the European Union, the European Common Market, was to prevent war in Europe. You know what they were saying? And they were right. They were saying, we European Christians are crazy. We are white, we are Christian, we are European. Why are we killing each other? 2,000 years. It started out with the Greeks and the Romans. Then it was the Romans against the Gauls, the French. Then the Huns, the Germans, against Spain and against England. And, the Roman Empire was a bloody mess. But it was an empire. And then you look at European history, you see the Spanish and the Portuguese and the French, they're all fighting each other. Napoleon conquers Portugal and Spain, and then they're fighting England, and then they're fighting Germany, and the Russians are fighting, everyone's fighting everyone. And then World War I, and then World War II. 70 million people died in World War II, Europeans. Jews, Christians, others. And so the European the European governments decided, no more war. We will not tolerate war in Europe anymore. And do you know why there's war in Europe? Why there was war in Europe for 2,000 years? Because of Jesus Christ. Because all these nations were Christian. All these nations believed in God. All these nations believed in the Bible, and they were all killing each other. Catholics, Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, Protestants. I don't know how much you know the history of Europe, but there were some very, very bloody, long wars. And Europeans were killing Europeans. What for? And one of the great accomplishments of this one world government, of these Europeans, was there is no more war in Europe between Christians. The only exception was the Yugoslav breakup, in which you had Catholics against Serbian Orthodox and Muslims. Everyone was fighting everyone. And what about the Jews? How many people saw Fiddler on the Roof? Fiddler on the Roof is a very, very important program, Broadway musical or movie. Or Tevye the milkman is in his barn, and he's arguing with God. And he says to God, why did you choose us to be the chosen nation? All that did is get us killed and expelled. Why don't you go choose some other nation? But that's not God's plan. And there's a part there where this Bolshevik communist Jew, revolutionary, comes to the rabbi and his pupils in the synagogue, and he says, Rabbi, I have some very bad news. And the rabbi says, bad news? What could be so bad? You want bad news? You read the Bible. In the Bible, you have a flood. Everybody dies except for except for Noah and his family. That's bad news. What could be so bad? He said, no, you don't understand. The Russian government is going to expel all of us from our homes. Anatevka is abandoned by its Jews. And this is a synopsis of the history of the Jews in Europe. And so you know what happened? A lot of Jews abandoned Judaism because Judaism meant only one thing, and that is to be persecuted. You know what? I'm here in Texas with you guys. I've heard so many stories about Texans, and when I hear the full story, they were all Jews who came here 150 years ago, and they joined the Baptist church or the Catholic church or the Lutheran church, and they declared themselves to be Christians because they didn't want anyone to know that they were Jews. And they said, oh, we're Germans. San Antonio, that whole area settled by German Jews, the Germans. And here in America, people say, oh, you're from Germany? Okay, come to church on Sunday. That was it. There was no more persecution of the Jews. But in Russia and in Eastern Europe, the Jews flocked to the Communist Party. Now, you know, in Christianity, in Ephesians, you have something called the one new man in Christ. You all know this? One new man in Christ? Well, the Jews developed an ideology called one new man in Marx. Because if you believe in Marx, socialism and communism, what you do is you abandon God. All these troubles, all these wars, all this hatred, all the expulsions and persecutions and pogroms, all of this is because of God. If we banish God, so they thought, the hatred of the Jews would stop. But the hatred of the Jews was many centuries in the Russian church and other churches. And eventually many Jews understood that even the one new man in Marx wasn't going to save them. But you may ask, why are the Jews so communist and socialist today? Why have they always been? And that is because of the horrible persecutions in Europe. You remember what I said before about the Jews in the American Revolution, about the Jews in the Civil War. And Jews were heroes in the American military always. And all those Jews, almost all those Jews, intermarried with the Christians. Because Christian girls are beautiful, Christian boys are handsome, and we all believe in the same God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, in the same Old Testament, and Messiah is a Jew. And America is good to its Jews. So why shouldn't we just all intermarry? And so many, many millions of Jews in America disappeared, meaning they became Christians. It's called intermarriage. It's called assimilation. And so who are the Jews today who vote for the Democrats? These are the Jews who came from Europe in the last 100 years. And these Jews see the churches, the steeples, the crosses on the steeples. This is the same Christianity of Russia that persecuted us, or Germany. But it is not. American Protestantism has been very different than what we saw in Europe. And I, as a Jew, get into a lot of trouble when I'm talking to my fellow Jews. I say, you Jews need to go to church on Sunday. They look at me, what? Are you telling us to go to church on Sunday? Oy vey, Avi Lipkin is a Jew for Jesus. And I say, I'm not a Jew for Jesus. I didn't get to know the Christians till I started going to church on Sunday. So Saturday I go to synagogue, Sunday I go to church. Guess what? Same God, same Bible, Messiah is a Jew. And the same ethics. And then I say to the Jews, you know what? You guys need to read the New Testament. Are you telling us to read the New Testament? Oy vey, he's a Jew for Jesus. I said, the New Testament is a Jewish book. Very similar in many ways to the Talmud. It is a collection of debates between rabbis and apostles, and they're explaining the same things. Jesus was a rabbi, I believe, and he was part of the debates that were going on in those times 2,000 years ago. My parents never taught me to hate Christians. But in Hebrew school, it was accepted that if the Christians all hate us and want to kill us, and I decided to move to Israel in 1964 when I was 15, believe me, I didn't like Christians so much. Only when I was 41 and I started speaking as an Israeli army spokesman in the reserves in Christian churches did I get to understand that I had been completely miseducated in the synagogues. And my granddaughters come home and they tell their father, Daddy, we were taught in our Orthodox Jewish schools that all Christians are bad. This is anti-Semitism in reverse. And we sit down with our grandkids and we say to them, tell me something, are all Jews good or are there bad Jews? Oh, they're bad Jews, sure. Good Jews, bad Jews. I said, well, Christians, there are good Christians and there are bad Christians. I know that it's not the subject right now that I'm talking about, but eventually in the next, well, we finished an hour already. In the next 2 hours, I'm going to talk about my Judeo-Christian party in Israel. The Jews and the Christians are one people. We are the people of the book, and we better get to know each other and love each other. You remember The King and I? Getting to know you, getting to know all about you. Yes, we better get to know about each other. Do you know what anti-Semitism is? It's when a Christian hates a Jew or when a Jew hates the Christian. I have a sister. I love her very much. She's 75. She's a retired professor, Democrat. And she says, so where are you now? I said, I'm in Texas. And so she says, oh, I hate Texas. So I said to my sister, you hate Texas? Have you ever been to Texas? She said, no. I said, well, you're an anti-Semite against Texans. You need to go to Texas. So you see, there are many, many Jewish people, they vote Democrat because what they know collectively is the persecution of Eastern Europe and not the greatness of the first 500 years of America in which Jews were in the front lines of General Washington's army and Lincoln and Jefferson Davis. And I say Jefferson Davis not as a curse, because the Jews were loyal to the states in which they lived. And frankly, it bothers me that they're tearing down Confederate statues too, because not whether the Confederates were right or wrong. They were wrong. But, I mean, history is always written by the victor, you know. But it was part of the history. You don't attack history. You don't judge people because you weren't in their place. So do you understand why the Jews vote Democrat? Democrat Party is the party of the minorities, or at least it was. You heard about that scandal with Goya Foods? I mean, Goya Foods, these people are heroes. They're feeding the poor people in the kitchen pantry ministries. I think that the Democratic Party is going to have a very, very big surprise with the Hispanic congregation. And you know what, with the black people too. Black Americans, there's no president who's been as good as to them as Trump. Okay. So little by little, I'm going to shift over to where we are today. There are two movements or two organizations that want to destroy America from within. One is the Marxist socialists, communists, and the other is the Muslims. Both of them hate Christianity. Both of them hate Judaism. And like I said before, if you take the Lord out of the equation, America is no longer foolish in the Lord, it's just foolish. So that's how you destroy America. And I am here as a Jew of the Jews from Israel, not a Christian. And I'm saying the Jews need to support the Christians because America must be a strong, faithful Christian nation for Israel to survive. And I don't have to tell you about past presidents. But President Trump, undoubtedly, even the Democrats agree, has been the best president Israel has ever had. You know, I've been in Israel 50 years. I never voted in American elections because I thought it's like being married and going with another woman. I thought it was unethical to vote in American elections. And then when I saw that Hillary was winning against Trump, I went and I voted absentee ballot in Israel. Do you know that 65% of the Jews in Israel support Trump? The other 35% are communists and socialists. But 65% of the Jews in Israel are religious or nationalist. And they appreciate Trump because he's a great president and he's a great friend of Israel. So anyway, the morning after the elections, 7 a.m. in Jerusalem is midnight. I don't know if you remember. Midnight, I put on the radio in Jerusalem, and they said, Hillary's winning, Hillary's winning, Hillary's winning, and then, oh, Pennsylvania just went red. And I was acting rabbi in Pennsylvania in 1995 in the town of Williamsport, and I knew that they had oil, coal, and gas. And I knew that the Democrats were destroying the infrastructure of Pennsylvania. And I knew that Pennsylvania was going to go red. And Florida went red. And Ohio went red. And I knew it was over for Hillary, praise God. And I cried. I cried of happiness when Trump was elected. You have to make a confession. This has been a very successful financial trip for me. A year ago, my trip to the U.S. was a disaster. You know why? Well, Trump was doing so great, economy was doing so great, and then all of a sudden comes COVID and other things, and people are actually concerned that, Trump might not win in November. When Trump or the Republicans are in trouble, that's when Avi Lipkin makes his money. I was in the Tea Parties during the Obama years. Those are good years financially. It has to be bad in America for me to make money. And let me tell you, this has been a good trip because it's 3 months before the November 3rd elections, 2020. And if Trump wins, I kind of feel I'm going to have to pack up. But I'm enjoying life now. And I know that God wins. And I know that Trump's going to win. I know the Hispanics are going to vote for Trump, the blacks are going to vote for Trump, and the whites are going to vote for Trump, and even many of the Jews are going to go over to the Republicans this time because they're getting to understand the greatness of Christian America. Okay, so how do you destroy America? And I'm going to talk a little bit about Islam now. I explained to you before about Marxism. You work through the universities. You work through the educational systems. You put in this communist, socialist poison, drop by drop. And little by little, you brainwash the children to be against America. And where are the churches? Praising Jesus. We love Jesus. We love Jesus. But those people who don't go to church become anti-American. And the church is not teaching the American history anymore in the churches. Churches, all churches of all denominations should be having now American History 101 classes in the church, to tell the truth. Do you know of any churches that have American History 101? So that's the Marxists. Now, Islam has been around for 1,400 years. The only contact America had with Islam was in 1803, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. And actually, President Jefferson's Quran was the first book that an American president had to explain the motivations of the Barbary pirates in North Africa. And when President Jefferson read the Quran, he said, you know what, we're going to build a U.S. Navy because they're taking our sailors and making them slaves. American sailors are the most expensive slaves in North Africa at the time. By the way, slavery was abolished by Abraham Lincoln in 1865. But slavery was an institution in Africa then and today. Slavery is big time in Africa today. I don't hear Black Lives Matter saying about slavery in Africa today. And white sailors were the best slaves, most expensive. Benjamin Franklin was in Paris negotiating for the freedom of these American sailors. Failed. So President Jefferson decided to build the U.S. Navy. After that, we really did not have much contact with Islam as Americans. When I moved to Israel in 1968, there were 100,000 Muslims in America. The Jews were 6 million. By the way, how many Jews are there in America today? 6 million. We should have been 12 million because millions of Jews came to live in America from the Soviet Union, from Israel, from Argentina, from Brazil, from South Africa. Natural reproduction. We should be 12 million Jews, but we're only 6 million. You know why? Because the Jews have a new religion. It's called the career. And you don't get married till you're 40 because you got to develop a career. You got to go to college. You got to be top of the state-of-the-art, top of the class. Jews, you want to be a doctor? You basically are studying till 40. Lawyers, doctors, and then what happens is they marry ladies who are usually not Jewish, working with them in the same field. Christian women, beautiful. Christian men, handsome. Good people. Came out of Judaism. So why not? And then they don't have children because they're too old. We skip 1 generation, 2 generations, 3 generations. So at the end of World War II, there were 6 million Jews in America, and 75 years later, there's 6 million Jews in America. And the 6 million Jews in America today are married to 4 million Christians. What does that mean? It means in 2-3 generations, no more Jews in America. Because they intermarry and they become Americans. You know what? They won't be Democrats either. They'll be Republicans by then. And so God has a plan. God wants his Jewish children, are you listening to me? God wants his Jewish children and the Christian spouses to move to Israel. I'm going to talk about this a little later. Our population in Israel is going to grow from 7 million Jews to 17 million Jews and Christians by the law of return. Now, I know the rabbis want to change that. I'm going to fight that. I'm going to make sure that the law remains, and the law of return remains. How many Muslims were there when the Jews were 6 million over the last 70 years? How many Muslims were there? 0. Then 100,000. And how many Muslims are in America today? 30 million. 30 million Muslims, 6 million Jews. And former President Obama said in his inaugural address in January 2009 that America today is a Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu country. Was Obama lying? No, he wasn't lying. Telling the truth. America is a Christian Muslim country because America is 300 and something million. The Muslims are 30 million, 10%. And the Jews are 6 million. Our numbers are not increasing. Our numbers as Jews is actually decreasing in America. We are disappearing. Not because of concentration camps, but because of love. The Christians love us so much and marry us, and Christians are fantastic spouses, but as a Jewish national entity, we are disappearing. I've been in Israel 52 years, and I've been talking about this, and nobody understands, nobody wants to know. The only people who listen to me are the Christians here in America. Because the destruction that is coming to the Jews is coming to the Christians. And the destruction that's coming to Israel is coming to America. You understand why I'm so supportive of President Trump? He's the only man who can stop this at this time. My wife, Rachel, has been my wife for 50 years. And her work in the radio and TV as a monitor would be to listen and watch the Arabic news. And so she would pick up this Saudi station that was saying 35 years ago, okay, even if it takes... And my wife thought she was nuts. They were nuts. Her bosses thought they were nuts. Her bosses are socialists. They don't believe any of this stuff, the Muslims say. All fantasy. When my wife retired 5 years ago, The same station was saying, we said 30 years ago that we would make America Muslim in 150 years. Well, we were wrong. It's not going to take 150 years. It's going to take only 30 years. And America will be a Muslim country. Now, there are two ways to destroy America, either through military attacks like 9/11, worse than Pearl Harbor. Did 9/11 succeed? Did they defeat America? No, they didn't. And so many people said that's all wrong, many Muslims. The way to destroy America is not through military activity. The way to destroy America is through immigration. And so my wife, Rachel, would be monitoring the Arab broadcasts, monitoring the international Islamic conferences that had representatives from the entire Muslim world. And the United States would be divided up among the wealthy nations that had oil, and a plan was devised how to bring in tens of millions of Muslims into the United States when there were only 100,000 in 1970. How do you go from 100,000 Muslims in 1970 to 30 million in 2020? In 50 years, you got 30 million Muslims here. The first key is the universities. So the Sultan, I discussed this in my second book, Christian Revival for Israel's Survival. You take a university like Duke University in North Carolina, and this was in the 1980s. And the Sultan of Brunei sends them a cablegram. There was no internet in those days. Cablegram, telephone call, airmail letter. I mean, young people don't even know what I'm talking about. Telex. And the Sultan of Brunei says, I'm going to come to your university and I'm going to give you $23 million. No strings attached. What's the university going to say? Bring it on. Do you know of a university that would say no to a free, no strings attached gift of $23 million? And so the Sultan of Brunei comes to Duke University in North Carolina. They give a big party for him. And he has the right to say a few words. Presents them with the check. And he says, we know about Duke University. Duke University is a good school. And we want to make your school better. We think that you at Duke University should have an Arabic-speaking studies chair. Arabic language. You people at Duke University should have an Islamic studies chair. And if you do this, we'll give you another $23 million. What is Duke University going to say? No? They say yes. So now it's up to $46 million. And then they say, well, we know that you Americans don't have a clue about Islam. We're going to help you. We're going to send you our professors. Now, what are Muslim professors? Missionaries. And the books, Islamic missionary teachings. And we know that you need young kids to tutor your young kids. So we're going to send you 500 young Muslim students, males, every year, who will pay full room, board, and tuition. I don't know if you realize what I'm saying. This is a lot of money. And Duke University says, bring it on. So after the first year, you have 500 young male Muslim students. After the second year, you have 1,000 young male Muslim students because you have freshmen and sophomores. Then you have freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. Then freshmen, sophomore, junior, and seniors. So you got 2,000 young male students. Now, I'm not saying that this is the case in every marriage, but they marry American girls because Muslim men are allowed to marry Christian or Jewish or otherwise American girls. And after 2 years, once they marry an American girl, what do they get? Passports. After they get passports, they have chain immigration. How many people heard President Trump talk about chain immigration? It's when family brings in family. And the children of such a marriage very often are Muslims because the fathers are Muslim. I remember I used to work with Women Aglow, and they were telling me that there were 10,000 American women who had been abandoned by their Muslim husbands, who were absconded back to the Islamic world with the children. How many people have heard of these things? But for those who stay here, the population grows and grows and grows. So let's say Duke University cost $100 million to the Sultan of Brunei. Do they have money for 10 universities, $1 billion? Of course they do. Do they have money, $100 billion for 1,000 universities? Of course they do. That's for the oil that they never worked for. They have Westerners developing the oil and then, gathering it for them. They just collect the money. If Allah has blessed them with all this money, they got to use that money for Allah. Now, think with me for a moment. University gives out 500 student visas. Is that immigration? That's not immigration, it's student visas. The immigration is later. And if they have 1,000 universities, you're talking about ballpark figure of 500,000 student visas a year. And they can also go back home and marry 3 other Muslim wives. It's a different system. And Christian or Jewish or atheist American women don't stand a chance against this system. They don't have a right unless they stay in America. Do you understand ballpark figure 500,000 student visas a year? Do you understand that that's how they got to 30 million in the last 50 years? I have emails that I received about U.S. charter pilots who resigned in protest because they were flying in illegals to an American airport, parking the plane at the end of the runway. Buses would go out to the end of the runway. This is primarily the Somalis and others, and pick them up, give them $3,000 each, and send them off to the northern states. All illegal. And I don't think it's over. I could start preaching the Bible and show you how there's going to be a lot more Muslims coming also. Just look at Ezekiel 28:29, the desolation of Egypt. 100 million Egyptians will have to flee the destruction of the Aswan Dam. You're going to get 50 million Muslims from Egypt very soon. If there's a civil war in Turkey or a civil war in Iran, which could happen, there are tens of millions of Muslims that are going to flee the hellholes and they're going to come to the West. And what's the greatest country in the West with the greatest capability of absorbing immigrants or people fleeing? United States. And the church is asleep. The church won't teach any of this. You're like deer in the highway staring at the headlights coming on at you. I always say Christians are asleep. The Jews are not asleep. The Jews are comatose. Jews won't even invite me to the synagogues to speak. Nobody wants to hear any of this stuff. But it's going to happen. A very senior person in the Israeli government, I won't mention his name, he's in a very senior position regarding Jewish immigration. But he's a socialist. He's Labor Party. He doesn't agree with a word I'm saying. And that's the leadership in Jerusalem. So America today has 30 million Muslims. Louis Farrakhan, Nation of Islam, claims 4 million. Shiites claim 9 million. And the Sunnis claim 17 million. 30 million. You're concerned about Ilhan Omar or Talib, Talib, or whatever her name is. That's nothing. Wait till you get all these other Muslims getting elected. And as the Muslim population grows, the Muslim representatives are going to be in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. And it's their right because they represent a constituency. And I speak to the Jews that they say, well, the Muslims were our allies in Spain in 1492. And that's what the Jews are locked into. And I have news for you. The Germans in World War I were the allies of the Jews in Europe, in Poland. My family was from Poland. They were so kind to the Jews in World War I that the Jews could not believe it when the Nazis took over. And not only did the Nazis kill 6 million Jews, the Nazis killed 7 million Christians even before they killed the Jews. So anyone who denies the Jewish Holocaust denies the Christian Holocaust in Germany as well. You see, we Jews and you Christians are tied together. Our destinies originate from the same point, and they will be consummated at the same point, whether we like it or not. So I say we might as well get to know you, and you get to know us. That's why I'm here. At this point, with your permission, I think we'll take a very quick break, and I will be back in about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, okay? So meanwhile, if anyone wants to take the microphone and sing Hava Nagila, that would be nice.
I need a break too.
You have any idea how many people have joined in?
I saw 23.
Okay, shalom to everyone again. So we had our very refreshing break, and now we are back in battle with the second half. And what I want to do right now is I want to share the most important of all my testimonies. It's all in my first book. It's Fanatic Islam, A Global Threat, but actually has nothing to do with Islam, really. It's about the one world government, about the Council on Foreign Relations, about money. And I have to tell you, when I came for the first time to the United States to speak as an Israeli army officer in the reserves, this was during Desert Shield in November, December 1990. And I was an Israeli army spokesman at the time, and we had been debriefed by our commanders as to what was about to happen in Kuwait. And so I gave a number of possible situations, went back to Israel. Everything I said came true. So he said, Avi's a prophet. Avi's a prophet. He knew it was going to happen. I said, no, I'm not a prophet. I'm an Israeli army spokesman, and I was debriefed by my commanders. That's why I knew it was going to happen. And so I come back in April of 1991, which is right after Desert Storm, and I get a desperate call from a lady, a PR woman in Dallas, and she says, get on the next plane. You're speaking tomorrow before the Dallas Council on World Affairs, Council on Foreign Relations. I didn't know who they were. My Christian friend said, you better be careful. These people ain't Christians. They're Americans, but they ain't Christians, because their God is Mammon. Mammon in Hebrew is Mammon. Mammon means money. By the way, look at money. Mammon is the same word. And if you get in their way, they're going to kill you, because they don't want anyone getting in the way of them making money. And so I came down to Texas. I got to the dinner, very nice hotel, Stafford Hotel in Dallas, which I think today is Renaissance. And God has a sense of humor. This happened right after Purim. Now, you know the history of Purim. There was Haman and there was Mordecai, and this is a battle between Haman and Mordecai, or between Satan and God. And we Jews are actually commanded to get totally plastered on Purim. We're supposed to get so drunk that we don't know the difference between Haman and Mordecai. And it's ironic, but you know, the Council on Foreign Relations does not set up their meetings from today to tomorrow. I was brought in as a pinch hitter. I was replacing a no-show. Who was the no-show? Boris Yeltsin. Boris Yeltsin had been in Dallas to give 4 lectures to the Council on Foreign Relations. He gave 2 lectures, and on the 3rd day, he got drunk. Now, Boris Yeltsin was a very serious alcoholic. They put him on a plane back to a sanitarium in Russia. So that night, there was a dinner without a speaker. And that's when they called me to come down. And the next day, the 4th night, I was the speaker. So see, God Almighty in heaven had to get Boris Yeltsin drunk so the door would open for Avi Lipkin to come and speak in his place. Purim. And then the second funny thing of God's sense of humor is that General Latham, retired of the U.S. military, says to me when I arrived there, so tell me, sir, what's it like to be a general in the Israeli army? And I said to him, General? Aren't you General A. Lipkin, Chief of Staff of the Israeli army? I said, no, I'm Lieutenant A. Lipkin, Army Spokesman Reserves. They thought they were getting the Chief of Staff of the Israeli army. So not only was it Purim and Boris Yeltsin got drunk, but they got the wrong guy. Well, you know, my name's Avi, and the Chief of Staff was Amnon, and for people from Dallas, Amnon, Avi, it's all the same. And they said to me, well, you better give a good lecture. I said, listen, I'm a professional Army spokesman lecturer, and you'll get a good lecture. And it was a good lecture. They actually invited me back. But the Israeli government vetoed that because I was supposed to debate with Professor Edward Said, who was a PLO spokesman. So that did not happen. Anyway, so I gave a lecture. This is April 1991, right after Desert Storm. And Israel was the unspoken ally of the United States. We were told not to counterattack against the 39 missiles that Saddam fired at us. So Israel was the unspoken ally. I get up to speak. I talk about UN resolutions 242 and 338. And those resolutions say that Israel will negotiate with its Arab neighbors for new borders which are secure, recognized, and defensible. Give me 2 minutes. I'm going to finish the first testimony. So, UN resolutions 242 and 338 say that Israel will negotiate with the Arabs for new borders which are secure, recognized, and defensible, because the borders of June 5th, 1967 were not secure, recognized, and defensible, meaning new borders. And so we had dinner, and after we had dinner, I was getting ready to leave, and they said, "Where are you going? We're not finished with you yet." I mean, they really thought I was chief of staff of the Israeli army, and they had a message for me to take back to Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir, which I did. And they said, "Avi, you're a good speaker for Israel because you're an American-born Jew. And you don't speak with a funny Israeli accent. We understand everything you're trying to say to us. And we here in Dallas don't like funny accents." That's funny. Anyway, we don't like Russian accent of Yeltsin, and we don't like Arabic accent of this oil princes, and we don't like Oxford English from London. And you speak like a Yankee from New York, but you speak clear English, so you're a good speaker for Israel. But you know what your problem is? They said to me, "You don't know realities. Reality number one, Israel is all alone. You guys are going to make peace with the Arabs whether you like it or not. And we don't even care about UN resolutions 242 and 338. You're going to give the Arabs not 91%, not 93%, not 97%. You're going to give them 100% of whatever they want. Because we Americans are not your allies anymore. And we will never give you an airlift again, like we did in 73. That's what they said to me. And secondly, you have to remember, there's only one thing that made America great, and that's the barrel of oil. Steady price of oil, steady supply of oil, and we're not going to let the Jews get in the way of that. Is that clear? That's what they said to me. I was in complete shock. I didn't answer them. But I had as my guest that night 2 Christian couples, evangelicals, and one of them got up and looked at the people in the room and said, "You call yourselves Christians? You say that what made America great was the barrel of oil, the steady price and steady supply of oil. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Because what made America great wasn't the barrel of oil. What made America great was Jesus Christ." Thank you in the back. Somebody here is awake. I'm just joking. Oh, you're awake too. Okay, good. I mean, I was the only Jew in the room. And Eric Gustafson let them have it. What made America great was Christianity, the Bible, God, Jesus Christ. I'm a Jew, and I'm saying it. And then his daughter got up, Carol Burton, and she said, "Besides, it says in the Bible, those who bless Israel are blessed, and those who curse Israel are cursed." And she sat down. And all of a sudden, I saw visions of a Holocaust. Not only the Holocaust of World War II, but the Holocaust that was yet to happen if America went against Israel. America with its allies that want to destroy Israel, primarily the Islamists. I'm not saying Muslims. Muslims are okay. Islamists have a plan to destroy Israel. And it was then in April of 1991 that I decided that I was going to throw my lot in with the Christians. I mean, the kind of Christians that love Israel. And Jews don't recognize it, and Christians don't recognize it, but we're stuck with each other. Whatever happens to the Jews in Israel is going to happen to the Christians in America. This was 1991. This is almost 30 years ago. Do you realize I've been speaking in over 1,000 churches in the last 30 years? Sometimes I think I'm speaking to myself. This is the most important testimony of all my testimonies. And it explains why Christianity must not only survive, but be victorious in America and in the entire Christian world. And, I'll tell you something else. There's a country called India. India is Hindu. It's pagan. But it's the greatest democracy in the world because only democracy can work in a country like India with 1 billion people. I wish China with 1.5 billion would be a democracy. I wish it would be a Christian nation because wherever Christianity wins, the people are blessed. Okay. So this is the most important testimony of all my testimonies. I tell you this after I did the background. The first session was like the background to everything. Now I get into the really hard stuff. It says in the Hadith is not the Quran. Hadith is a collection of sayings going back to Muhammad. And it says in the Hadith that on the day of judgment, there'll be a final battle, and the Muslims will kill every Jew on the face of the earth. And there will be some Jews, it's known as the final solution. And there will be some Jews who temporarily evade death, and on that day, Allah, the God of Islam, will give mouths to the rocks and the trees, and they will call out, "O Muslim pursuers, there's a Jew here hiding behind me, come and kill him." Until every Jew in the world is dead. So Christians will say, okay, well, that's the Jews. We don't care about the Jews. We're Christians. Okay, what does it say about the Christians? It says Jesus Christ is coming back a second time as an Arabic-speaking Muslim warrior. How many people have heard that? That Jesus is coming back as an Arabic-speaking Muslim warrior. And he's going to kill the Antichrist, who's a Jew. How many people know that the Antichrist is a Jew? By the way, if you say this to a true believing Muslim, you know what he's going to say to you? Wow, you're so smart. Where did you know that from? That's our secret. And they'll say, well, Avi Lipkin was here, but right now he's in New York, or he's in Europe, or in Israel, or something. And Jesus Christ, the Muslim, kills the Antichrist with a lance. Then he goes up to Jerusalem, to the Temple Mount. He prays with his fellow Muslim believers, 400,000. Then Jesus Christ the Muslim comes down from the Temple Mount, breaks the crosses, destroys the churches of the Christians, destroys the synagogues of the Jews, and on that day of judgment, all the Jews and Christians who are one people, you're listening? The Jews and Christians are one people. We're the people of the book. Saturday people, Sunday people. All the Jews and Christians will have their throats personally slit by Jesus Christ the Muslim. Ask any Muslim. They won't deny it. They don't deny that on the day of judgment all Jews die, and they don't deny on the day of judgment all Christians and Jews die. So you see, you guys are stuck with us and we're stuck with you. The saying, either we hang together or we hang separately. But we're going to hang. And that is the program of Islam. And as I explained before, the population has grown from 50 years from 100,000 to 30 million. And I'm predicting eventually it's going to go up to 100 million Muslims in America because of the destructions that are taking place that will take place in Egypt and in Turkey and Iran. Easily. Europe will be overrun by Islam. There will be only one place where Jews and their Christian spouses will be safe, and that will be Israel. By the way, immigration to Israel was on the average 25,000. It's up to 90,000 this year. Actually, thanks to COVID-19, because many Jews say that the treatment in our hospitals in Israel is better than the treatment in American hospitals. 90,000. I'm saying that 10 million Jews and Christians are going to move to Israel soon. And at the end of the message, we're going to take Jordan and Saudi Arabia and Syria and Lebanon, and it'll be the borders that we see in Deuteronomy 11. From the sea to the Euphrates and from Lebanon to the desert, which is Saudi Arabia. We're going to talk about this towards the end. I'm the only Jew in the world who talks about the impending coming of the Antichrist. And I'm going to explain to you how that's going to happen. It's very simple. I don't hear any Christians talking about it, but then again, you needed a Paul and you needed apostles, Jews, to come to the non-Jews to teach them. That's what I'm here for. Anyway, so what I want to do now, change gears completely, and I want to talk a little bit about Israel, about the socialist rule in Israel, about my Judeo-Christian political party that I founded and I've been leading in 3 elections, getting ready now for the 4th election. One of the purposes of this trip is to raise funds so that I can campaign in Israel amongst the different groups in Israel. Don't forget, Israel is a small country, but when you campaign for elections, you got to campaign in Russian, Hebrew, Arabic, and English, and Ethiopian. And I have Ethiopian candidates, so we're going to be campaigning in Ethiopian. Now, you've all heard of Mark Twain. Mark Twain visited the Holy Land in 1867. And he wrote a book called Innocents Abroad. You should read the book. It's an interesting travelogue. And he says, if this is the promised land, when he was in the land of Israel, he says, this is the promised land, I sure don't want it. I don't want the promised land, because the promised land is a horrible place. It's swamps, deserts, barren hilltops. The Turks chopped down the trees. You had malarial swamps. It was a hellhole. And in the second half of the 1800s, you have the advent of nationalism in Europe, the advent of communism, socialism, the struggles between them. And we start to see the beginnings of the homecomings of Jews from all over the world, primarily Russia, Poland. And like I said before, many of them, actually the majority and politically the leading group, was the socialists. Also the communists, but eventually the communists were pushed out by the socialists, who were a little bit more rational. One of the reasons that Joseph Stalin, dictator of Russia, recognized the state of Israel was because he was sure Israel was going to join the Soviet bloc as a communist country. But Ben-Gurion, with his wisdom, said, we still got 6 million Jews in America. We need the money, we need the Jews, we're going to be neutral in the Cold War. And this caused Stalin to see Jewish Israel as a traitorous country to the communist cause. And little by little, the country gets recovered. Trees are planted, the swamps are drained, sand dunes turn into housing. I mean, you come to Israel today, it's a dreamland compared to what it was 150 years ago. 1920, the socialists take over completely politically. People like myself, who were in the nationalist camp, were basically pushed out. And the history of Israel's politics, to this day, is dominated by socialism. Even if Netanyahu is the prime minister, elected by the majority, about 65% of the population, together with the Orthodox, but the administrations, the pyramids of power, are solidly socialist. It's interesting. My son Aaron says to me that there's going to be a war between Israel and Iran in the month of August. And there are 2 reasons. You know, the U.S. governments and Israel have been kicking the can down the road for decades regarding Iran. And we've gotten to the point where we can't do that anymore. But because the media in Israel is socialist and left-wing, like in America, and because the generals in Israel are socialists. You cannot be a general in the Israeli army if you don't go through the socialist filter. And the socialist generals listen to the socialist media, and they're being told that Biden is going to win the elections. So if you have to go to war with Iran, is it better to go to war with Iran when Trump is president or when Biden's president? And so the socialist military strategy is to go to war now in August. See how God works? How God confounds those who don't want to believe in him? We have another thing. There's no tourism in Israel now because of COVID-19. Do you know it's very complicated to have a war when your airport gets locked down because of missile attacks? My sons and my wife are begging me to go home immediately before the war, before the airport gets shut down, and before the flights to Israel stop. But you know what? That's good. Good to have a situation like that of no tourism and have the missiles come in on you when there are no tourists to get involved in that. So this is the time now for the attack. It's like if, God forbid, somebody has to go to the hospital for an operation, very often they tell the person to be fasting for 12 hours or 24 hours before the operation. So Israel now is fasting as far as tourism is concerned, so that the slate will be clean for the operation against Iran. And 2 weeks ago, the Israeli Air Force asked for air fuel tankers, refueling tankers from the U.S. Air Force 2 weeks ago. So we are looking, I think, at a war very soon with Iran. It's something we've been waiting for basically for 40 years. I mean, they're yelling in the streets, death to America, death to Israel. And American presidents kick the can down the road, and the Israeli leadership kicks the can down the road because Israel can't do anything without America's approval. I know that President Trump does not want to get involved in any foreign escapades before the elections. But if Biden's going to be president, Israel will not be able to attack Iran if the Democrats are in government. It has to be done now. So this leads me to my second most important testimony. I started with my first testimony, and I'm going to do my second testimony. Can I ask for another bottle of water from the kitchen? Thank you. So I'm going to waste a little bit of time in the beginning of this testimony because I want this gentleman to hear it. You know, I suffer for Christ in Florida in the winter and South Texas. And I suffer for Christ in Vancouver, Canada in the summers. So winter in the south, summer in the north, because very often it's driving. Yeah, that's supposed to be funny. Nobody's laughing, but probably what you need is a good stiff drink or something. And I'm driving up Interstate 5 from California up to Oregon, Washington State, and then over to the Canadian border to a neighborhood called Maple Ridge. And that's 40 minutes to the east of Vancouver. And I'm invited to speak in Shalom House. And Shalom House is a farmhouse in a beautiful area at the foot of a mountain. Beautiful, beautiful area. Thank you. Just what I needed. So I get there to speak like tonight, 3 hours, three and a half questions and answers. It's a farmhouse. There's room for 50 people. Many of them were Canadian police because they had heard that this is going to be like an intelligence briefing. And the lady of the house, while I'm speaking, she's calling up some Messianic groups in towns called Kamloops and Kelowna. Has anyone heard of Kamloops? Kamloops is on the road going east and then north from Vancouver through the Canadian Rockies, up Fraser Valley. Beautiful country. And Kelowna is right in the middle of the British Columbia Rockies. And they have a little lake, a big lake actually. It's kind of like the Sea of Galilee. When you're in Kelowna, you think you're in Tiberias and in Galilee. And so there were two Messianic groups there. And there was a problem, and that was that the Messianic groups were trying to get the Jewish community involved. And the Jewish communities torpedoed my visit because Jews don't want to hear what I'm saying. Jews don't want to hear that there's going to be a Holocaust in this country or in Canada. Jews don't want to hear that they're going to have to flee to Israel. So nobody wants to hear me. Christians follow something called eschatology. And so Christians listen, or Messianics or Jewish roots groups. So the Monday night and Tuesday night meetings were canceled. And so the lady of the house in Maple Ridge says to me, "Do you want to speak 3 nights here?" I said, "Sure." I spoke 10 hours. 10 hours over 3 days. All different material. Wednesday, Thursday, I had a 20-hour drive across the Rockies up to Edmonton, Canada, in the province of Alberta. I got there Thursday evening, like 5 minutes before I was supposed to preach. 200 people in a Northern Baptist church. You all know the difference between Northern Baptists and Southern Baptists, right? Northern Baptists go to hell. That's a Texas joke. Okay, sorry about that. And 200 people were there. 20 Jews from the Jewish community came, which was very nice, very friendly. The next day was Friday, eve of the Sabbath. And the lady organizer, Cora Brisbois, British Canadian married to a French Canadian. This was a very typical French romance. She calls up the local rabbi, Orthodox Rabbi Emkin, and says, "We have an Israeli army spokesman, Avi Lipkin, and he's speaking in churches here. Would you take him in for the Shabbat?" I'm from Israel, I'm traveling. So the rabbi says, "Yeah, send them over." I get to the rabbi's house, and the first thing he says to me, "What's a nice Jewish boy like you doing in the Christian churches?" And I said to him, "Listen, Rabbi, we are 5 million Jews. In 1999, we were 5 million Jews. Today, we're 7 million. When I moved to Israel, we were 3 million. I feel like I'm part of the history and the growth of Israel." So at that time, we were 5 million. And I said, the Muslim nation is at 1.5 billion, and they want to wipe us off the face of the earth. I said, if we had 100 million born-agains on our side, that might help level the playing field. And he said to me, "Wow, I never thought of that. That's a wonderful idea, getting the Christians to stand with us. It's wonderful that you go to the churches. I mean, I, as a rabbi, would never step into church," he said. House of pagan worship, because that's what it says in the Talmud. We are locked in the Talmud 1,500 years ago. And, but good that you go to the churches. So the next day at synagogue, he introduces me. Here's Avi Lipkin, an Israeli army spokesman. The Christians give him 10 hours to speak, because I had just spoken 10 hours in Vancouver. And we Jews will give him 10 minutes to speak at the end of the service. Because at the end of the service, there's a meal. And everyone's eating and laughing. And by the way, Jews don't drive on Shabbat, supposedly. So there's booze on the table. And we are drinking booze, and we are laughing, and we are partying. And this is like a social club. Do you think the Jews want to hear about the final solution, the destruction of the Jews in America and Canada by Avi Lipkin? So anyway, by the way, I have to tell you something about Jews. I know that here in Odessa, Midland, you don't really have too many synagogues or Orthodox synagogues and big meal and many people and everything, but let's talk about Dallas. Dallas has some really, really big synagogues, wonderful synagogues. The people are fantastic. People are wonderful. I stay in Dallas sometimes. I go to the synagogue. And I studied for 3 years to be a conservative rabbi. I can lead services. I can be a cantor. I can read the Torah. I can read the Haftorah, the prophets. I can give sermons. The only thing I cannot do is circumcision. That's funny. Anyway. Anything else? I did marriages. I did funerals. Okay. Just circumcisions I'm not going to do. Now, if the synagogue service starts at 8, I'm going to be the first person. The moment we have 10 men, we have a minyan. We start the prayer service. And the first part of the prayer service is psalms and warm up, things that we say, very nice. And I love it. Actually, I love the first part of the service the most because it's between you and God and it's silent and we do it all together. After 45 minutes of preliminaries, we take out the Torah scroll. The Torah service takes about an hour 15 minutes. If there's a bar mitzvah, so the number of Jews increases from 10 to about 30 because the young boy comes with his parents and his best friends and they have to be there for the Torah service, so it's up to 30. The Torah and Haftorah finish, then we have the rabbi's sermon. By then we're up to 50. People come to hear the rabbi's sermon. Rabbi's sermon is about 20 minutes. And the rabbi's sermon usually is like a university lecture. I mean, it's really challenging to hear the rabbis usually give a sermon. This is up to 70. Rabbi's sermon finishes, we have the Musaf, or concluding service, and by the time we finish, we are up to 300 people. Because the people came to eat. Now, you've heard of JFK. JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, right? But that's not the one JFK I'm talking. I'm talking about Just for Kiddush. JFK, Just for Kiddush. Jews who come to the synagogue to eat. And the booze is on the table, and they're eating and drinking and laughing. And let me tell you, Jews work very hard 6 days of the week. On Shabbat, they're in synagogue. And it's a wonderful time. And everybody goes home a little tipsy, very happy, and then everybody goes home and takes a nap. And that's the Jewish Sabbath. So anyway, so I get up to speak after the service, after the rabbi introduces me so graciously. And all of a sudden, two liberals, with a capital L. In other words, they're liberal with you if you are liberal like they are, but if you are not liberal like they are, they will not be very liberal with you because they are socialist totalitarians. I'm talking about 30 years ago in Canada, which is kind of like United States. By the way, when I want to get American and Canadians angry, both of them at the same time, when people ask me what's my favorite city in the United States of America, I say Vancouver, BC, which is Canada. Anyway, so they don't let me speak. They're shouting me down. You're a racist. You're against the Muslims. The Muslims are great people. Yes, I said, I know Muslims are great people, but there are some people who are terrorists. Don't forget, this was 2 years before 9/11. Muslims are fantastic people, but the attacks on 9/11 were Muslim. So I didn't talk. I drove 20 hours across the Canadian Rockies, and I didn't talk. Who comes to the rescue? A Christian woman. The Christian woman was attending the Jewish synagogue every Shabbat. You know why? Did Jesus go to church on Sunday? Jesus went to synagogue on Shabbat because Jesus was a Jew. Some people think he was a Catholic priest from Sicily. No, he was a Jew from the land of Israel. And I love the Catholics. I want you to know they're great people, but sometimes they have some strange ideas, especially the Pope. When the Pope says that Allah and God are the same. Okay, we'll get to that a little later. I have to tell you, this is not really part of the message, but we've only been going for 2 hours and we still have another hour, so I have a little bit of time to tell some funny stuff. I'm driving across Alabama at 1 in the morning, and I'm falling asleep. So I'm playing with the dial of the radio, looking for stations to keep me awake. And all of a sudden, I came across a bluegrass concert. Banjos, ukuleles, I love that stuff. I love music of any way, but I like bluegrass. And then all of a sudden, I hear a guy get up and start talking like a preacher. And he gets up and he says, and that Jews don't recognize Jesus Christ as their Messiah. And Protestants don't recognize the Pope as their leader. And Baptists don't recognize other Baptists in the liquor store. And everyone was cheering, and it was so funny. And but I was completely awake. When he said Jews don't recognize Jesus Christ, I said, I woke up completely. And then they put another bluegrass song. I said, wow, this is the greatest. I could drive all night with this kind of stuff, And then the same guy gets up and he says, and Jesus Christ wasn't a Christian. And Mary wasn't a Catholic. And John definitely was not a Baptist. Let me tell you, America is the greatest country on earth because you can tell these things and get away with it. So anyway, this Christian woman coming to the Orthodox Jewish synagogue wanted to know about Jesus Christ. You know, Jesus read from the law, he read from the prophets, and he gave a sermon. That's exactly how we do it 2,000 years later. Nothing has changed in 2,000 years. So let me tell you a joke about change. How do 100 rabbis change a light bulb? You know this one? 100 Reform rabbis asked the question, does the light bulb want to change? 100 conservative rabbis establish a committee. You know, if you establish a committee, nothing will ever happen. And how do 100 Orthodox rabbis change a light bulb? Change? Because nothing has changed in 2,000 years. You heard that joke last time I was here. Okay. So you want to know about Jesus Christ? Read the Old Testament. Go to read the Torah in the synagogue. You know, be with the Jews. And the Spirit is the same Spirit. By the way, the Pharisee rabbis are the same Pharisee rabbis today also, especially in Israel. They're fighting me with my Judeo-Christian party. So she says, if you're not going to let Avi Lipkin speak, and if Avi agrees, I want to say something. And you all know me. I'm here every Shabbat learning. And I've got to tell you guys something. I am a social worker for the government of Canada, province of Alberta, city of Edmonton. And I am a caseworker for a Muslim Egyptian woman doctor. What's her story? Do you remember Mother Teresa? Mother Teresa was a saint. She was a very holy woman. She fed the poor in India. She healed the sick. And when she died at age 99, she died in her bed, which was the Catholic Church. She died amongst her family, which was the Catholic Church. Everything she did was the Catholic Church. And praise God for the Catholic Church, for what they did. So there was this Muslim Egyptian woman doctor from Cairo. And basically she was doing the same thing in Cairo, in the poorest neighborhood of Egypt, poorest neighborhood of Cairo. And she wasn't married. She was all alone. She was in her 40s. And after 20 years of serving for free, volunteering for the poor people of Cairo, she decided she was going to emigrate to Canada. She got she would get a clinic. She'd be the most popular, famous doctor in Edmonton, Canada, because she was like Mother Teresa. And so she applied for a visa to Canada. The day it was adopted, when they agreed to give her an immigration visa, there was a knock on her door, and it was 3 jihadis, 3 holy men from the mosque with the turbans and the long gowns and beards and the Quran. And she knew them because she prayed every day in the mosque. And they knew her and she knew them. And they came and they knocked on her door and they said to her in Arabic, Mabruk. Mabruk in Arabic means congratulations. And she answered them, Allah barak fik. Allah should give you also congratulations. Why do I have congratulations? They said, because we know you're going to Canada. Well, how did you know that? That was just approved yesterday. They said to her, we know everything about you. We have our people in the Egyptian government everywhere. They know everything about you. And yes, we will also have congratulations for us because you're going to work for us. And she said, what does that mean? Well, you're going to have a clinic. And people are going to come to your clinic. And when people come to your clinic, they have to fill out forms. Names, addresses, telephone numbers, place of employment, addresses, telephone numbers. The Jews will come. The Christians will come. The Muslims will come to your clinic. And you're going to collect all of this on a hard disk. Because in 1999, you had floppy disks and hard disks. That's how old I am. And, hey, listen, I'm 49er. So And you're going to give us the hard disk. You're going to be helping us to catalog all the Jews in Edmonton. And if the Jews marry Christians, you're going to catalog the Christians. And the Messianic groups, and the Hebrew groups, and the pro-Israel churches, the pro-Israel pastors, all of this is going to be on your disk. And you're going to give it to us. And when a war breaks out in the Middle East, a jihad will break out in Canada and in America and in Latin America and in Europe. Now, what did I just share before? There's going to be a war between Israel and Iran, but it won't be just Iran. It'll be Hezbollah in Lebanon. It'll be Gaza. Who knows who else? There is going to be a very major war in the Middle East, probably in August. I don't know. Maybe, God willing, it won't be in August. Maybe it'll be later. I don't know. Nobody knows the time of wars, rumors of wars. But at this moment, from what I'm hearing in Israel, it's going to happen very soon. I may be stuck here in the U.S. with you guys. Not only might you have COVID-19, you might also have martial law. Because what's going to happen in the Middle East is going to bring about holy jihad in America. Why are they defunding the American police? So that the American police will not be able to deal with 9/11 attacks. If there's another 9/11 attack in New York City and the police is being castrated by de Blasio and Black Lives Matter, how is New York going to deal with terrorist attacks, 9/11 attacks in New York City? The planes are still going to be shot down. Bridges and tunnels are going to be attacked. Subways are going to be attacked. Thousands, perhaps millions of New Yorkers are going to die because of the stupidity of de Blasio and Cuomo. And there are people who are preparing to attack America. So the doctor looks at these jihadis and says, hey, come on, guys, you see me every day in the mosque. I pray 5 times a day in the mosque. You see me. I give money for charity, zakat. I give money. Am I not a good Muslim woman? But I'm also a doctor. I swore the Hippocratic oath to heal people and save lives. I don't understand politics. I'm not interested in politics, and I'm not into killing any human beings, even the Jews. This woman was a Muslim woman, and she was a saint. So they said to her, oh, you don't want to work for us? And she said, no, I don't want to work for you. So standing next to her was her best friend, helping her in the clinic, also in her 40s. And these Muslim jihadis grabbed the friend, pulled out a knife, and they slit her throat. And the woman was on the ground with the blood gushing out. And they pointed their finger at the doctor and said, if you don't work for us, this is what's going to happen to you too. I'm not talking about ISIS. I'm talking about 20 years ago, before ISIS. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Fatah, Hamas, all these are the same thing. The next day, she had asylum in the Canadian Embassy in Cairo, Egypt. The Royal Canadian Air Force flew in a private jet to pick her up and bring her to Canada, to Edmonton. And this Christian woman attending the Orthodox Jewish synagogue is the caseworker for this Muslim woman doctor. Do you realize how God works? There are so many vectors all meeting in a certain place. It's not me. I just happened to fall into that circumstance to pick up that information. The story was in all the newspapers in the province of Alberta. It was never in the newspapers in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, or Montana. Local interest story. And it happened in the summer of 1999, and I was there when it happened. And she went on to say that she works with the Canadian police. And in the estimation of the Canadian police, they say 90% of the Muslims are peacekeeping, law-abiding people. They want Islam, but they're not going to start going around killing people. But they'll keep the peace and follow the law. Only 10%, only in quotes, are terrorists. What did I say before? You have 30 million Muslims in America. What's 10% of 30 million? 3 million. And they have guns. The mosques are armories. And the Jews say it's not our way to have guns. We are against ownership of guns. That's what the Jewish rabbis are saying, the Jewish communities. We are relying on the police to protect us. But the police is being defunded and castrated by the Democrats. And so the Jews are going to be slaughtered, and their Christian spouses are going to be slaughtered, and those who don't move to Israel are going to be slaughtered. Do you understand why my Judeo-Christian political party is going to become the biggest party in Israel? Even if I died tomorrow, there's going to be a wave, a tsunami of immigration from the United States, Canada, Latin America, and Europe to Israel. Millions of people are going to move to Israel. I want to tell you 2 or 3 little testimonies, and then I'm going to go on to the part about the party, and then, I talked a little bit about the party, but not too much, and then I'm going to conclude with the Antichrist and the building of the temple in Jerusalem. I covered different subjects, but they all intertwine and interconnect. I spoke in Yukon, Oklahoma, First Baptist of Yukon. And 4 policemen come up to me after the service. They're members of the church. And they say to me, we have to tell you a story. Our colleague, the sheriff in Tulsa, was responding to an alarm that went off in a mosque in Tulsa. And they were checking out the premises. There was a door open in the basement. And they found dozens of AK-47s hanging on the wall. AK-47s. And they call up the FBI, and the FBI says, you can't touch them. They got licenses for everything. There's another story. Once I told this story in Houston, and people were looking it up on their phones as I was talking, and they found it. 2004, a Jewish high school student is beheaded by his best friend, a Saudi prince. And this is local interest story in Houston. They were inseparable. They were best friends, and then they were just beheaded his Jewish friend. Because in Islam, you behead the Jews. Then, do you remember the Boston Marathon bombing? The Chernayev brothers? So there was a triple murder in Boston, and all the leads went cold. 3 Jewish college students were found with their throats slit and heroin powder on their bodies. But their wallets were not taken. But the police concluded it was a drug deal that went bad. And the Russians, in Moscow, the Russians warned the FBI and the CIA, those Chechens, you better watch out for them. Chechens are South Russians who are Muslim, Turks. And the Chernayev brothers were Chechens. And the FBI never checked anything out. And after the bombing, all the Chechens were arrested in Boston. And it turns out that the Chernayev brothers were the ones who got the 3 Jewish students high on heroin and then slit their throats because they were Jews. But you can't talk to the police because it's not politically correct. Do you know sometimes, not so much anymore, but in the past I used to speed on the highway deliberately to get caught by the highway patrol. And while they were writing out the ticket, I'd be giving them my books, CDs and DVDs about Islam. And I said, you guys don't have a clue about Islam. Oh, we can't take bribes. I said, well, giving me the ticket. It's not a bribe. Take it back to your police station and let the policemen study this stuff. Because you cannot talk to the police about Islam. And the police cannot learn about Islam because it's politically incorrect. Stupidity in this country. You have an enemy that attacks you on 9/11, and President George W. Bush says Islam is a religion of love, Islam is a religion of peace, Allah is God, which is what the Pope says also. All lies, all wrong. And the American people are put back to sleep again, only to be awakened in the next attack or the next attacks, which I think are coming soon. We already see the attacks happening with Black Lives Matter, and Black Lives Matter are directly connected with Hamas. They're founded by Hamas. The Marxists and the Muslims hate each other, but they have one thing in common: the hatred of Christianity and the hatred of America. Do you understand why I'm here tonight? Do you understand why my life is in stake? Because there are not too many people sharing the truth like I'm doing. And by the way, I don't charge a fee. I go by faith. And God has been rewarding me by faith. Anybody who says, come and speak, I go and speak. They say, how much do you charge? I don't charge. So now I want to go into a little bit about my party. In Israel, I'm going to make it very short and very simple because politics in Israel is completely crazy and Americans can't get it. In Israel, you don't vote for a candidate. You vote for a party. You vote for a list. And one of the things I've noticed, we've got like 43 political parties. And actually, my party came in number 22 out of 43, but still very, very marginal, very little. There are no Christians or Christian believers, or Messianics even, in the Israeli parliament, in the Israeli Knesset. We have 120 members of Knesset. We have, by the way, 13 Muslims, which is legitimate because they have their own constituency. We have 5 Druze. Druze are a different type of people who are speaking Arabic, and they're an offshoot of Shiite Islam, but they're not Muslims anymore. So 13 Muslims, 5 Druze, and no Christians. The rest are Jewish. Now, before 1988 and the dissolution of the Soviet Union, our Christian population was Arabic speaking only. And they were 2%. The 2% were divided half into Catholics and half into Greek Orthodox. And the two churches hate each other to this day after 1,000 years, the Greeks and the Catholics. And within the Greeks and the Catholics, they have clans that all fight each other. So because they're all divided, they never were able to get a united party together into the Knesset. Actually, what they did, most of them just voted for the Communist Party. Because in the Communist Party, you've banned God, you've banned the churches, and what you have is one new man in Marx. So you see Christmas trees and Christmas in Nazareth, but they're not really religious. What we have been seeing in the last few years is a growing movement of Arabic-speaking Christians that joined the Israeli army because they realized the Muslims are going to wipe them out. They saw what happened in Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. In 1988, 1989, 1990, with the dissolution of the Soviet Union, all of a sudden Israel receives 2 million Russians. Of the 2 million Russians, 400,000 are not Jewish because the fathers are Jewish, the mothers are not. So according to the rabbinate, they're not Jewish. So between the Arabs and the Russians, that's 500,000 people out of 7.5 million. 8%. There should be at least 1, 2, 3 members of Knesset from the Christian-believing world. None. And so I came to the conclusion, or rather God spoke to me saying that you need to create a Judeo-Christian alliance party. Not a Christian party, but a Judeo-Christian unity party. It's been a long process, very complicated. I worked very hard to raise $60,000 that went straight to the lawyers. They formed the party, so now I have a party. We ran in 3 elections. Today we have some new people coming in, the Ethiopian Jews and some of their Christian family members that came in. And we are going to have Ethiopian candidates too, Jewish and Christian. But we are not known in Israel. And so my work until now has been forming the party, basically running the party on fumes. Well, the fumes finished. So this trip we're getting gasoline. And that Cadillac is going to run very soon and start campaigning again. So at this time, our potential voters are 650,000, and we need 140,000 votes to get into the Knesset. So it's not an impossibility. It's just going to take a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And there are some very nice people on this trip that have been generous and have given me checks, and that's the money I'm going to use for the campaign. Now, all of this is all well and done, 650,000 potential votes. But what do you think about the fact that 10 million Jews and Christians are going to move to Israel from the West? Instead of 650,000, it's going to be 11,000 potential votes, which will make my party the biggest party in the Knesset. When is this going to happen? Mañana. When is mañana? Mañana is mañana. It could be tomorrow, next day, next week, next month, next year. But at some stage soon, the crazy, crazy Islamists, Black Lives Matter, Hamas, terrorists who want to destroy Christian America, the last 2.5 hours you've heard the plans to destroy America. The great Christian Satan in America must be converted to Islam. There's some people who say when American Christianity is brought down, then the Marxists and communists and socialists will destroy the Muslims, and some people say the Muslims will destroy the Marxists, socialists, and communists. But the bottom line is American Christianity must be destroyed, and the Jews with them. Okay. Now we go into the home stretch. You see, what I do is like a quilt work. Every little piece of the quilt then fits together to make a complete picture. And I have this in my books, CDs, DVDs. Remember ISIS? President Trump said we defeated ISIS in Syria and Iraq. Now, I love President Trump. There's nobody who loves President Trump more than I do. But he was wrong. ISIS is down, but it's not out. ISIS is down, but it's not defeated yet. It has suffered a very serious setback in Syria and Iraq. But Jordan is 80% pro-ISIS. Saudi Arabia is 92% pro-ISIS. So Avi Lipkin has the one bullet theory. One bullet kills King Abdullah of Jordan, next day it's caliphate. 2 bullets in Saudi Arabia kill the king and his son, Saudi Arabia goes Islamic caliphate. And when that happens in Jordan, there'll be black flags of the caliphate along the Jordan River. That means they're digging tunnels under the Jordan River. We have a very long border with Jordan. By the way, I value the peace agreement with Jordan very much. I value the peace agreement with Egypt very much. But ISIS doesn't. And ISIS plans are inimical to Israel. And I predict, when you hear King Abdullah has been assassinated, we are one step away, even then, from a war with Jordan. And we will be forced to conquer Jordan. And if this happens in Saudi Arabia, we will be forced to conquer Saudi Arabia, but not by ourselves. You know who's going to command us to take Saudi Arabia? How many people heard of the one world government? It's not the Christians and not the Jews that are going to ban Islam. It's going to be the one world government that bans Islam. Do you remember what I said at the very beginning of this second session, where I said that the one world government says to the Jews and to Israel, we will not let the Jews get in the way of our oil supplies. Well, you know what? Israel today is part of the one world government. We have oil, we have gas, we have pipelines with Cyprus and Greece and Italy. We're going to be supplying Europe with its oil and gas needs. So we're not in the way of oil supplies. We are part of the oil supplies now. We have high tech. We're part of the international high tech. International commerce. Everything is working between Israel and the world. So we're not in the way of the oil supplies. You know who's going to be in the way of the oil supplies? ISIS. How do you destroy Christianity? You destroy the oil. You destroy the energy sources. Without oil, you cannot create plastic. Without plastic, the world economy collapses. Now, America has the Permian Basin, where we are right now. So America doesn't have a problem. Canada doesn't have a problem. They have shale. Mexico doesn't have a problem. They have oil. But Europe, China, India, Japan don't have oil. Forget about the problems with China right now. If there's no oil, the world economy collapses within 2 weeks. ISIS is going to blow up the oil wells in the Persian Gulf and Saudi Arabia and block the straits of Hormuz. Within 2 weeks, the world economy collapses. Billions of people die of starvation and chaos and sickness. Well, COVID-19 is already the beginning of that. And I think that the one world government, whose God is mammon, money, the one world government is going to say to Israel, listen, we've got reports that ISIS is going to take over those oil wells and blow them up. We can't let that happen. So we of the one world government will take the eastern part of the kingdom, and you Jews will take the western part of the kingdom, which is Mecca, Medina, and Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai is in Saudi Arabia, not in Egypt, in case you didn't know. And the Jews will be commanded to take Mount Sinai, Mecca, and Medina. And the Islamic terrorists are going to release ABC weaponries, atomic, biological, and chemical, to kill billions of human beings. When you kill billions of people, you destroy the world economy, the one world government suffers. Do you think the one world government wants to suffer? And you know what they're going to say to Israel? Okay, here's the deal. You take Jordan, Saudi Arabia, you defeat ISIS in that area, we'll defeat ISIS in the eastern part of the kingdom. And in return, we will ban Islam, and you Jews will build your temple in Jerusalem. Does that make sense? You Jews were right all along. You wanted a temple, and we said, no, we're doing business with the crazy Muslims. But, thing is, if the crazy Muslims pump the oil and they sell to us, and then they reinvest the money in Wall Street, in American economy, in world economy, so they're not so crazy. But if they blow up the oil wells, then they're really crazy. And that oil belongs to the human race. Do you understand what I'm saying? So we're going to ban Islam because Islam is against all of humanity. Don't forget, the Islamic thinking is we kill the Jews on Saturday, kill the Christians on Sunday, kill the Hindus, kill the Buddhists, kill the blacks, and then we kill each other. The Muslims kill each other. Sunnis kill Shia, Shia kills Sunnis, Sunnis kill Sunnis, and Shia kill Shia. Islam is the perfect depopulation system. Is depopulation good for the one world government? No. The one world government doesn't want to depopulate the earth. They want more people to make more money because their God is mammon. So here comes the home stretch. Are you ready for the Grand Slam home stretch? You Jews are going to build your temple in Jerusalem because we've banned Islam, so there's no more opposition to the temple. And you go ahead and you build your temple. The rabbis are going to have to go along with this because the one world is commanding us. Israel's not going to go against the one world government. And the one world government will say, we will help you to build your temple. We'll make it the most magnificent building in history. And then we will send our top leader from the one world government to officiate at your temple in Jerusalem. He's called the air conditioner. You know, AC. Do you know there's no other Jew in the world talking about this kind of stuff? And when is this all going to happen? When is the war going to happen in the Middle East? Mañana. When are the Jews and Christians going to have to flee from the United States to Israel? Mañana. I pray that the Christianity comes out on top, but that you're going to have problems in this country. Well, the crazy Marxists and Islamists that want to destroy America. When are the borders of Israel going to expand from the Nile to the Euphrates? Mañana. When will the temple be built? Mañana. And I conclude with one sentence. How many people understand that we are living in the times in which so much of Bible prophecy is being fulfilled right at this time? We are so fortunate that we are that generation. We're going to see everything happening. I'm personally extremely excited and extremely happy about all that. I mean, I'm not happy about people dying and disruptions, but people who lived 100 years ago, people were just struggling to stay alive. Now we see the picture in its completeness. By the way, Ben, you want to bring the questions?
Okay, You pretty much answered one of these, but it's the first question is: do you foresee the Israeli government opening a door for the Anosim to return to make Aliyah?
Okay, the answer inevitably is going to be yes. What I see happening is the borders are going to expand. We will be needing Judeo-Christian Western civilization in order to settle that western part of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon. The Kurds are on the other side of the Euphrates right now. Kurds are our friends. We will be allies with the Kurds. We will need population to settle those areas. And my suggestion, my idea, is the establishment of a federated autonomous Christian republics under the umbrella of Israeli defense. And so the people who live in those countries, it'll be one country, it'll be Greater Israel, but Christians will be voting in their own regional parliaments. And in such a manner, this will not affect the Jewish numbers within the land of Israel proper, but Christians will be allowed to come and visit and be part of our kingdom. It'll be kind of like United States of the Middle East. I don't know if I answered this gentleman's question, but that's what I think. At this time, the Israeli rabbinate, the Israeli government is very fearful of 20, 30, 50 million Anosim coming because it would change the ethnic character of the Ashkenazi and the Sephardic Arabic-speaking Jews who live in Israel.
And do you see that happening, everything you described, like at the coming of Mashiach, or like at...
Hey, if you're talking about the air conditioner, man, you're talking about the Mashiach.
Okay, you got it.
You all understand about who's the air conditioner, man, yeah. The AC.
The next question is, what can we do to raise awareness? Some people are being shut down as students in universities, and what can we do to better raise awareness with this?
Well, actually, I think President Trump hit it on the head when he said that universities are not teaching institutions anymore. They are brainwashing institutions, and funding should be denied to universities whose study program is not real history, but communist propaganda or Islamic propaganda. And one of the things I found, indeed, is that there are many boards of education in many states in the United States which have been bought out by Islamic money, and therefore pro-Islamic textbooks are used, anti-Semitic textbooks are used, and of course the Jews are going to be targeted for destruction by the Muslims. So all of this is to prepare American young people to hate the Jews and destroy the Jews. So I think there has to be, firstly, a very, very strong scrutinizing of the boards of education and the books they use. There's a very famous Jewish lady whom I admire very much, Lori Cardoza Moore, and she has been in the forefront in the battle regarding the boards of education and the books, textbooks being used. But I also think that the churches need to come out of their Mount Olympus, and the churches need to have History 101 classes, which are pro-Christian in their approach, to teach American history, the real American history. Kind of what I did tonight, it would have to be American History 101. The churches need to do this and not rely on secular and anti-Christian schools, high schools and universities to do it.
Okay, is Israel going to annex Judea and Samaria?
Eventually, obviously, yes. Maybe not right now, but we have to see where the situation with Iran goes, and if indeed there is some kind of a major war or revolt, then we're going to go full blast ahead. Yes, sir. You have a question in the back.
How do you think Russia is going to react to the attack on Iran?
A very excellent question. First, I want to say something about something else, but it'll lead to this. Russia is a country of 130, 140 million people. America is like 350 million. Russia is not a country that can be arrogant enough to think that it can be world power number one. China has 1.5 billion, India has 1 billion, but really the world, it will be led by the United States of America if it maintains its Christian path. What Russia wants, shall I say, the wet dream, excuse the expression, of the Russians, is that America would be destroyed from within by a civil war. That's what China wants also. And it could be that the COVID-19, which is causing a collapse of many aspects of American life and economy and health systems and all this, the Chinese and the Russians are looking to destroy America from within so that there would not really even be a necessity for a war with Russia. Now, having said that, Iran is an ally of Russia because they are Shiites as opposed to the Turks, who are Sunnis and are enemies of Russia. There's a history of 1,000 years between the Turks and the Russians, long before communism. Turkey itself is beset by 31% of the population being Shiite, 25% being Kurdish. So Turkey actually is only 44% Turkish. I do not think that Russia would want to go to war with Israel, because going to war with Israel, I believe, especially during the tenure of President Trump, would mean war with the United States. Now, if Biden were president, God forbid, then Russia might feel free to attack Israel. That's why the war with Iran, I think, is impending. And personally, I have a very strong struggle within my own soul as to whether to drop everything and go home to Israel tomorrow to be with my family in the event of this war, or just to keep working here as much as I can, because the work that I'm doing here is also very important. Every person I speak to, every church I speak in, or every group I speak in, I think is critical. And maybe one of these days, some of my teachings get to President Trump too. Any other questions? Well, it's 20 to 10. I think we did 2 hours and 40 minutes, which is not so bad. So I hope it's been a blessing to all of you. And tomorrow, God willing, I don't want to say where I'm flying to, because there's some people who are following where I am and what I'm doing. So pray for me for safe travels. And you know me, I come back to Odessa at least once a year, so maybe twice. So we'll see. So God bless America. God bless America's Christians and Jews. And God bless all the good people on earth who stand for love and not hatred and destruction. So shalom to everyone. Thank you very much. How many?